Hey everyone, I'm here with a message for you before this replay of a older episode. And it's a message and a replay that I don't think anybody wants to give. Leanna Maksymiuk passed away on July 12th, 2024. She was a guest that I met through the podcast and had kept up with ever since. And with permission from her family, Mark, Poppy, and Ola, we are going to replay Leanna's story. You may have heard Leanna's story back when it released back in 2022, or this might be the first time you're hearing it if you are a newer listener. I want to send my deepest sympathies to you, Mark, Poppy, and Ola, and I'm so sorry for your loss. Leanna was a light, and being able to meet with her and connect with her and share her story is an absolute privilege and honor, and this is something that I hope that you are able to listen back to and remember all of the happiness and light that she brought into your lives. A friend of the family, Robin, has started a GoFundMe page for the Maksymiuk family, and I will be linking that in today's show notes as well as sharing on social media. Friends, if you have anything to give during this hard time for this family, I encourage you to do so. Something that I take great pride in is the community that we've built through the Rural Woman podcast, and being able to go back and look at Leanna's Instagram page and to see so many familiar faces, either from the podcast or listeners from the podcast, and leaving your words of encouragement and kindness and love for Leanna's family right now is something that really, I'm speechless. So if you're not able to give anything financially, please head on over to the Instagram page of Leanna's Lone Sequoia Ranch, and I will put those in the link as well. Give the family some love. It doesn't matter how many days have passed. It probably is still and will be fresh for this young family for a very long time. So thank you. Thank you so much. And please help the family in any way that you can. Take care. Welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast, a platform for women in agriculture, ranching, homesteading, and more to share their stories. I'm your host, Caitlin Dubin. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Leanna Maksymiuk. Leanna, along with her family, own Lone Sequoia Ranch just outside of Lumley, British Columbia. As a first-generation rancher, she wasn't even sure she wanted sheep, but accidentally fell in love with her daughter's 4-H ewe, and that was it. Her flock of Navajo Churro sheep make up the majority of the sheep she cares for, and growing sought-after wool is a top priority. After selling out her own wool clip and learning that so many local farmers were composting their wool instead of processing it, Leanna decided to seek out this compost and garbage-destined wool and started Waste Not Wool. She purchases and takes the unwanted fleece, processes it, and sells it as roving and yarn. It is an important part of her journey into wool to share the value that all wool has with her followers and her customers. I am very excited for you all to get to know Leanna today and her story. Before we jump in, let's go over this week's listener review. This week's 5-star rating and review comes from Wisconsin Beef Girl via Apple Podcast, also known as Katrina. This 5-star rating and review is titled Amazing Thoughtful Podcast. Easy listening with a variety of agricultural women, from beef farming to livestock guardian dogs. So many amazing guests and an awesome podcast. Well, thank you so much, friend, for leaving your kind rating and review over on Apple. And if you, my friend, would like to leave some kind words over on Apple, I sure would appreciate that. And you can hear them on an upcoming episode of the show. I also want to say a big hello and welcome to our newest patrons, Sarah V. Thank you for joining us, as well as my friend Emily. Thank you so much for bumping up your tier. And friends, we have a brand new patron, executive producer, Carrie Munven, who you heard on the podcast a few short weeks ago. So thank you so much, Carrie and Sarah and Emily, for your support of the show through Patreon. And friends, if you would like to support the Rural Women podcast and the work that me and my team do here each and every week, we sure would appreciate it. So you can head on over to wildrosefarmer.com and learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's interview with Leanna. Leanna, how are you today?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for joining me on the Rural Woman podcast. I'm excited to get to know you better and to be able to share your story with my audience.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So, for the listeners who are unfamiliar with you, give us a bit of your background, who you are, and how you got your start in agriculture.
So my name is Leanna Maksymiuk. I live in Lumbee, British Columbia. My husband, Mark, and my daughters, Poppy and Ola. We got our start here right at the very, very tail end of 2017 in the middle of a snowstorm. We moved to Lumbee. And so we officially started raising animals in 2018. With the sheep, it started with my daughter Poppy. We signed her up for 4-H to try and get her to meet some other kids. And she got her first ewe lamb, and then we ended up with 2 ewe lambs. And I was kind of hooked after that. So that started the whole sheep journey. We don't really have a lot of experience in agriculture. I had backyard chickens at our house when we lived closer to Vancouver, but that was it. And I worked in veterinary medicine as a vet assistant. So I have animal medical stuff in my background, but beyond cats and dogs, that was it. So it was just an interest in animal husbandry that got us to where we are, kind of.
That is so great. And I think I've said this in every episode that people talk about their kids in 4-H. I am so jealous of all of the kids who got to be in 4-H growing up. As a city kid, like, I was not exposed to this. I didn't even know what it was. And,
me neither.
Right? And like, they get to have an animal and they get to take care of it and they get to learn all of the things. And then when they sell this animal, they get the money from it. Like, I think I'm 4-H's biggest fangirl, like in their 30s.
I'm too. I always think I wish there was 4-H for adults, because I would be in there like right elbows deep.
I have said this from the get-go, and I've made the comment before, like, I want to be a part of 4-H, and people have said, like, you can be a leader, you can be, you can teach people things. I'm like, I know nothing. These kids know more than I do. They need to teach me what to do.
It's true. And it was really hard. Like, I think I came into like thinking, oh, we're going to move to this ranch and I'm going to get alpacas. That was like my initial thought. I'm getting alpacas. We're going to do fiber. And then when Poppy got this ewe, I was like, I don't really think I like sheep. Like, I don't know. And with 4-H, the parents aren't supposed to be involved. Like, we're not supposed to feed these animals. We're not supposed to help. We're just supposed to help our children do it. And so it was torture for me to not like go in there and like be with her. I'm like, no, you're Poppy's. I can't be with you. And then I was like, no, I have to get my own sheep. That's it.
Right. Exactly.
But after she went to auction, then I got 2 of my own.
That is so great. So
yeah.
Poppy's experience with 4-H. Tell us more about that and how she got to interact with new kids and kids that were on farms and ranches and in that lifestyle.
Yeah, she was really, really shy at the beginning, obviously, because we were new. And our town didn't have a 4-H at the time. So we were actually traveling about an hour to go to a different community. And those kids had all been in 4-H together for a long time. And one of the older girls kind of took Poppy under her wing, which was amazing. And that really helped boost the confidence with Poppy for 4-H. And then they go to a fair, which of course now has not happened for a couple of years, but the Armstrong IPE, the Interprovincial Exhibition, I think it's called, was like fabulous. And when she was at the IPE, she just blossomed there. It was like her element, like talking to people and showing her sheep and being involved was amazing for her. And she's always been quite good at doing speeches and those sorts of things. So like doing the speech component for 4-H was like amazing for her. Like she did so well. And it was so nice to see. I love it.
That is so good. We could probably talk just about 4-H for this whole entire thing. So tell us more about your ranch and what you are producing there.
So we have 160 acres here, and primarily it's sheep. We have a few little backyard chickens, and we have a few runner ducks. They're just here for entertainment purposes mostly, and our dogs, of course. But yeah, sheep. So we primarily raise Navajo churro sheep, but we also have a few other breeds in there too. I started with Shetland Jacob ewes, 2 of them, and we have a Cotswold and we have an Icelandic ram. So we have a few kind of outsiders, but primarily it's the Navajo churros that we have. We raise specifically for wool. We haven't butchered any of our sheep. We've been, I guess, kind of lucky in that sense that we haven't needed to. I've always wool, so we just keep them making wool. Yeah, it's wool.
So what made you decide to pick these breeds specifically for your ranch?
So initially when I was getting started, I got these Shetland Jacob ewes, the twin sister ewes. Honestly, they were from a friend and they were quite inexpensive. And she was like, listen, I just need to rehome these sheep. Do you want them? And I was like, yes, I do. And I knew that people were looking, I knew that Shetland wool was nice wool. And so I thought, well, I'll have them. The wool will be worth something, or I can use it for my stuff and it'll be nice. And that's great. We'll start here. And then one of them was pregnant that I didn't know she was pregnant. So one morning I went to the barn and there was Elfie, our little lamb, our wether. And he actually has really, really nice wool. So he was just a bonus that we got him. And then when it came to the churros, when I was going to expand, we waited a year with just these 2 Shetland Jacob ewes and then Alfie, just to kind of see what we wanted to do and, what I was going to look for in wool, because I was looking for wool characteristics. But because we live in the North Okanagan and it's cold here, like the winters are cold, they're really snowy, the summers are hot and getting hotter. And I wanted to make sure that whatever breed we had was going to be okay in our climate. And so, we have grass, but sometimes it's not the best quality grass because the summers are so dry. So I was looking for a breed that would do well on sparser grass and didn't need to eat as much. And when I started looking at breeds, the more they call them primitive breeds, so like the Shetlands, Icelandics, Jacobs, Navajo churro, and some of the other ones were really kind of fitting into this they kind of were painting this perfect picture of what really well here. And I really liked the churros because of their staple length. They have amazingly long fiber, it's ridiculously long. And all the other aspects, they're good mothers, easy lammers, because they eat sparser grass, they eat a little bit less. It was just all these good things. And then came the fact that there's hardly any churros. There's no Navajo churros. So it was really hard to track them down. And I found someone in Alberta that had them. And it turned into this 9-month conversation of I really want these sheep from you. Will you please sell them to me? And so we built a relationship with him. And we got them in 2020 and they've been amazing. Very different from our other sheep. Like they're a bit more flighty. They have that more survival instinct, I would say. They stick together. They're a team always. Like they're never apart from each other, which is really cool to see. It makes them a little bit harder to work with sometimes, but yeah, it's worth it. They're amazing. I love them.
Yeah, they are just such a neat breed. I was able to interview another rancher. She's down in Oregon, and Mickey has had these sheep for quite some time now, and they're just a really neat breed. And obviously, you know, they are not very common here in Canada, and I didn't even know we had some in Alberta. So I'll have to.
Not very many.
No, not very many at all. So you're also working to preserve this breed. So how do you go about that? How do you make sure to keep the integrity of this breed and keep this lifeline going to ensure, you know, these sheep stay around for a long time?
It's hard because we don't have a lot of genetic diversity in our the ones that we have in Canada, unfortunately. And because of the way that it works with the Scrapie program and the border, we really hard to get import rams to get new breeding stock. It makes it really difficult. I think it's important for us to be trying to preserve this breed only because they have such a long like genetic history, and any old lines of sheep genetics to keep in the system are a good thing. Like it's good to keep these old primitive, like really strong hardy breeds going, but it does prove really difficult. And I don't know like if and when we're going to be able to get new genetics. And it makes me a little bit sad because I don't know what that means for like the future of our flocks here. I mean, technically speaking, the majority of these sheep are in the southwestern part of the United States, which is where they belong. They belong with the Navajo people. The line that I have has been in Canada for about 25 years. So, you know, it was easier to get them in then. And, you know, if we can't get them in and they just belong down in the States, that's where they belong. So I don't know what that's going to look like for us, but we'll do our best. We'll try.
Right. Well, and that's the best that you can do, right? You can only do your best and try and keep the healthiest bloodlines that you can and just try and preserve them.
Yeah, exactly. I have a ram now, like the fellow in Alberta has a ram, and I have a ram now from him. There will be a little bit of line breeding happening, and you can do that to a certain extent before it becomes like inbreeding. So, you know, we'll get a line or two out of him, and then, you know, we won't do any more with that because it's not the right thing to do. But yeah, so we'll just plug along and enjoy them while we can have them and keep them. And if things open up and someone in the States wants to be part of the Scrapie program and we can share, that would be amazing.
Well, we're getting your story out there, and, you know, the Rural Woman podcast is listened to all over the world. So,
yeah.
You know,
hey, if anybody in Canada has Navajo churros, let me know.
Yeah.
We've done some cold calling. We haven't found very many other ones. So
yeah,
we're looking.
Yeah. So tell me more about, you know, your mission of having this wool and this fiber. You said that you potentially wanted to start your ranch and do alpacas for their fiber. Why was it important for you to have a ranch and have this fiber to produce?
I have always really liked doing like fiber type crafts, not knitting specifically, but weaving and, you know, just using wool and doing things with wool. And I honestly was looking for a way to have animals that didn't necessarily mean specifically that we had to have meat animals, because the like soft-hearted part of me doesn't want to butcher my own animals. But anyway, wool just seemed like an easy way to go. And then with the sheep, after I really decided I liked sheep when Poppy had them, it was an easy fit for us. We had the right type of fencing, and it was an easy thing for us to go to. Having the farm grown wool, I think, became a passion after I started following and talking to other shepherds that were doing great things with their farm grown wool. And it just turned into this like whole thing. It's hard for me to explain. It's important to me that we're sharing natural fibers, and trying to encourage people to go a little bit slower with their fashion and go back to things like wool sweaters and wool products. They're amazing. I think that we know that, but we've lost sight of it a little bit. So to encourage people to kind of look back into it and try it again is an amazing opportunity to be part of, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I just even think like we're talking about fast fashion and versus wool and all of the things. I think about the clothing pieces that I own that are made from wool, and they're cherished pieces that will outlive me. I have found amazing thrift finds of wool sweaters and all of these things that they are old and they smell like mothballs, but you know what? They are pieces that have been crafted, and they'll outlast your old cheap sweater that you got at Old Navy or wherever it is. So we were chatting a little bit about wool and shearing and all of that thing before we hit record here. And I was sharing that I didn't really understand how much waste there was when it came to wool and wool production coming from off of farms. It wasn't until I made a connection with a local farmer to me and I was able to go out and watch them shear. And they were explaining to me of how much of this wool will actually get used versus how much they're actually paid for this wool. And I was like astounded. So share with us and the listeners what it's like to be a sheep farmer who is using this wool or selling this wool in a typical fashion.
So from my perspective, so we have 20 sheep. So for some people that's a lot. For other people that I have no sheep compared to what other people have, right? So it's everybody's experience is a little bit different because of the numbers that they have. For us, our shear comes twice a year for us because the Navajo churro wool grows so quickly and so long. When it goes to the mill, it can only be a certain staple length. So we shear twice a year to keep those staple lengths a little bit shorter. So a lot of people don't have to do that, but we do. When the shearer comes, they take the wool off. We take it out of where it's being shorn and we put it on a skirting table, which really is a table. Ours is just made of metal. It's like on, what are they called? Sawhorses, with a metal, has 1 inch, 1.5 inch squares on it. It's like a mesh. We throw it out on that table, bounce it, try to knock some of the dirt and dust out. We take off the really dirty outside edges, which is called skirting. So it's parts around the bum where there might be, fecal matter. They're called dags, where there might be dags, really just dirty bits and really, really short wool that are coming off of the legs and the neck and the head. That all gets kind of thrown away instantly because it's dirty and it's too short. So it's not really good for wool. And then, that wool, once it's picked through, it goes to, it goes to a mill or you process it yourself. I have always sent it to custom woolen mills in Alberta. They do an amazing job for us. I had my brother-in-law lived in Edmonton, so he was like my transport person. So he would just take my wool for me. And then they skirt it again. When it gets to the mill, it gets washed and then carded. Carded is when it goes through brushes and gets more aligned. So it would go through a carder. And then that's where they send it back to me, is once it comes off that carder into roving. It's just like strips of carded wool, like long skinny strips, can also be called roping. They send it back to me. And then that is the product that I'm selling to my customers. I was going through all of my stock quite quickly. I didn't know what to expect the first year that I did it. I thought, I could have this wool for 2 years. I don't know what's going to happen. It sold out really quickly and I had nothing. And then you don't have anything again until you shear again. And then when it goes to the mill can have it for 6 months up to a year, depending on the backlog that they're dealing with, because there's only so many mills. And I thought, I have to figure out a way. I wonder if I could buy other people's wool, because in our area, specifically in the North Okanagan, we have a really large lamb meat production. People aren't growing sheep for wool, they're growing them for meat. So all of this wool is literally getting shorn and thrown into the compost or taken to the landfill or the dump. And it's such a wasted opportunity for this wool to be used for what it's meant to be used for. Like, wool is not a byproduct. Wool is a product. It's not a byproduct of the meat. It's a product that should be being dealt with, not as a byproduct. I think I've said byproduct 5 times in that last sentence. Oh, goodness. Anyways, so I said to my husband, I'm like, I think we should try this. I'm going to see if I can get some other wool, and I'll send it when we send our own wool to the mill, and let's just see what happens. And I had said, I was going to aim for like 15 fleeces. That's all. I was not going to try and get in over my head. I was going to do 15 and just see what happened. And then last year I ended up doing 75 fleeces, which is like triple of my own clip, right? And it went over so well. And all that wool is like being made into something instead of just being in the garbage. And I love it. I love it.
Well, and like you said, it's not a byproduct, right?
No.
I'll say it again, byproduct.
Yeah.
We could have a drinking game on the Rural Woman podcast. But, it's actually being used for something. And obviously, if it's being composted, then it's, being used for something else in a different manner. But like, to put it in perspective for these, the meat producers, they're getting like pennies if they are bringing it to a commercial wool place, right? Like, you're not getting anything for these huge bags of wool. And for me, as somebody who didn't know anything about it, I was like, you guys are doing a whole heck of a lot of work for not a lot of money, which I think that could be the slogan for agriculture in general. But
yeah, I know.
So the initiative that you've started is Waste Not Wool. So tell the listeners how they can get their hands on this wool and how they can support you.
Yeah, so I sell it through our Etsy shop. We're called Lone Sequoia Shop on Etsy, but you can find all the information through our Instagram, which is Lone Sequoia Ranch. I have a little link tree there, which will take you to all the places you need to go. Yeah, and it's there on Etsy. And I actually have yarn made this year, which is not something I ever thought that I would do. I hand spin myself. I'm a spinner, but I didn't know that I would get enough of the wool to actually turn it into a yarn. So we actually have our very first yarn line, which is so exciting. And it's like a nice creamy color, and it dyes so beautifully. It takes on color so wonderfully. People are dyeing it all sorts of crazy colors and making fantastic things like socks and hats out of it. So I'm really excited that it turned into something. It went beyond what I thought was ever going to happen. And so the prospect for 2022 is so exciting to me that I cannot wait.
What a neat thing. That just blows my mind. You went from a 4-H sheep to now spinning yarn from all over the Okanagan and using this product from sheep to make, quality garments that are going to last, your customers for a very long time. So bravo. Very cool.
Thank you. We only buy wool or take wool from people that are in the Okanagan. So any of the wool that you're going to get from me is either directly from my ranch, from my own sheep, or right from our general area. We have enough wool in the Okanagan that I don't have to focus anywhere else. And people message me. They're like, I'm, in the Lower Mainland. I have 10 sheep. You want my wool? I'm like, I do, but I can't take it. I'm only going to take stuff from the Okanagan because the local aspect of it is very important to us. So if there's anybody listening that lives in the Lower Mainland, get on it. There's wool down there too, or in Alberta, anywhere.
Honestly,
just go start talking to people. People literally are like, you take wool? And I'm like, I do. Do you have wool? And they're like, yeah, I have, 2 sheep. I have been collecting their wool for 2 or 3 years. Do you want it? Yeah, I do. I'll come pick it up and I'll bring it home and I'll put in all the work and all the elbow grease to get that wool to where it needs to be to go to the mill. So
that is so neat.
Yeah.
Well, and I just think for the people who are listening, who are like, this is such a good idea. You can go do this too, right? There are people in your area that have this wool that, as a collective, you can take and make a product that a consumer will buy, or you could make the product if you're a knitter or whatever, right? So, yeah, so cool.
I think it's important too that the other part of the thing with the Waste Not Wool is to showcase that other breeds of sheep, I mean, I'm really hard on merinos. Like I talk smack about merinos all the time, but it's because if you think of wool in your garments that you buy, it's merino, 100% merino. People are looking for merino combed top, which is like a beautiful product. It really is to spin with. It's lovely, but merino is just one of the plethora of hundreds of sheep breeds that are also growing wool, and every type of wool is good for something. It might not be the best to like make into a baby sweater for your newborn, but a strong wool is going to be really great for making durable things like horse blankets or rugs, gloves, like heavy wearing socks for inside your boots. Like people need to realize that like there's so many other breeds of wool, and that's also one of our things. Like if you call me and you're like I made Dorset, like I have Dorset wool, and people are like, oh, Dorset, it's so lovely once it's cleaned and it's strong and it's beautiful. I have a soft spot for the strong wools. I like the strong wools because that's what Navajo churro is.
Right. But I love that. I think at some point I need to have like a round table of all of the sheep producers that I've had on the podcast. And I need to find a merino producer because I don't think I have interviewed one yet. And I think I just need to sit here and let everybody duke it out of like what breed.
We would all get along beautifully,
right?
But I just like merino because of the New Zealand and Australian merino, they are king. Like that's what all the lovely, really expensive, sweaters are made of merino because it's beautiful. It is like there's no denying it. But there's a lot of other sheep that we need to show that their wool is good too.
It's true.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Team sheep all the way. There you go.
Team sheep.
Well, I want to shift focus a little bit more to your local area right now. We're recording this in the beginning of December, and the BC has experienced some devastating floods. You yourself are safe, but tell us more about what's been happening in your area and what you've been seeing.
Yeah, for sure. So we are okay where we are. I would say the closest town to us that's probably struggling right now is Merritt, and that's about a 4-hour drive from us, I would say. They were having a lot of difficulty when the flooding initially started. Right now, some other towns in the more like Fraser Valley, like Princeton and Hope, they're the ones that are having the worst trouble at the moment. The flooding is continuing because we keep having these atmospheric rivers, which, I mean, I had never heard of an atmospheric river in my 42 years until like a few weeks ago. They're in major trouble. And like Abbotsford, the Sumas Flat area, that's where we moved from 4 years ago. We lived in a town called Aldergrove, but not far. It's about 35 minutes to the flats there in Sumas. There's a lot of water. It's really bad, really bad.
Well, and from Alberta, we see what we see on the news, and they're able to interview a few producers and everything. But, as a person in agriculture, you just hear these stories, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking, the decisions that these farmers are having to make. And I don't know if I would be strong enough to do it.
I don't know that I would be strong enough to deal with it or to try and rebuild from it. And I was listening on the radio, there was a fellow that was a poultry producer, and he said that initially when the floods happened, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, right? He said that the trucks were coming to get his chickens to be picked up at 8:00, and the highway got closed at 6. And he said, he's like, my barn is underwater. There are 40,000 chickens that should have been processed. Like it was 2 hours between the truck coming and the highway getting closed. They all would have been processed for, meals and food. And he's like, and now my barn is just waterlogged, and there's these 40,000 birds just floating in it. And I cannot even fathom a dozen birds, let alone 40,000 birds. And the cows coming out of these barns with like the jet skis, and like, oh man, I can't even.
No, it's absolutely devastating.
Yeah. Or the ground crops. Like, yeah. I can't. Like, how? Oh my God.
Well, and after the summer that BC, and really anywhere in North America we had a really hard year. It was really hot and there was no moisture. There was wildfires that decimated towns and all of these things, and all of these, major events that have been happening that affect our industry. It is devastating, and I feel like everyone has just taken a beating. And I just say we do it again next year and hope that there's some type of difference. But I'm not to go down the huge rabbit hole of climate and whatever else. Like, there's people way more intelligent than me when it comes to those things. But I really feel for the people in BC right now.
Thank you.
So, Leanna, you are relatively newer in farming and in the agriculture industry. Tell me what it's like, bringing your family and raising your kids in this lifestyle.
I would say initially it was hard. I mean, Poppy was like 11 when we moved here, very much city girl, like shopping, all the things. And it's like, we're an hour away from like the closest mall, so that was something to get used to. Yeah. I mean, we do our best. Our younger daughter has Down syndrome and is autistic. And so, our farming life is a little bit different than maybe some other families would be. We take things a lot slower. Some days when it feels like we have to like hustle and rush and get a million jobs done, it's just not happening. We need to just take a breath, slow it down, work with however she needs to work that day. And, we get stuff done. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. Yeah. I would say everybody's really stepped up to the plate and has done a good job transitioning from city life to rural life. And it's been amazing. I say to Mark all the time, like, this is the best thing we could have done for our family, getting out of the city. It was really good therapy wise and stuff for Ola, but really dangerous in other aspects. Like, we lived on a busy road and she, would run out on the road and all those things. Here, all that stuff is not, we don't have to worry about that here. She can run and play and have fun and dig in the dirt and do whatever she wants, and she's safe. And that was the most important thing for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so great. How has Ola been with the animals? Because I know a lot of therapy is done with animals. Does she relate to them? Is she close with them, or is she like, get me away from them, I don't want to be around them?
So she really talk about the fact that we have animals. She likes to tell everybody that we have sheep and chickens and all that stuff. But her animal is our cat, Charlie. Her and Charlie are like two peas in a pod. She is my like video game techie kid. Her and her cat with her Switch on the couch is like her favorite place to be. She doesn't do well with kind of sporadic random animal noises. So like if we're outside and a rooster crows unexpectedly, she's like, nah, I don't like it. Like, I don't want it. But she does well. We've made some modifications. Like if we need to be working outside, she'll wear her like big kind of like ear muffs to try and like muffle some of the noise. And, if she doesn't want to specifically be helping with whatever task we're working on at the time, we just try to keep her busy and just keep her outside with us because fresh air is the best. But yeah, she's definitely my quiet kid.
Yeah. I can relate to, it sounds like she is really a cat rancher at heart. So
yes, 100%. Yes.
Which I can relate.
Yes. If she had, I don't know if she had a couple cats or even, that could sit on her lap. She sit like, it's so cute. They sit on the couch and Charlie sits on the arm of the couch and he just sits there and purrs and she just pets them and then plays her game for a minute and pets them. And, that's her most favorite place to be. I get it. Yeah,
I get it. That's a great connection for her to have. Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners who also may have special needs children on the farm, advice for them, anything that you just want to say?
I would say just embrace the slowness and the speed that you have to go to get your stuff accomplished. I always find that there's this pressure, like we have to hustle. We don't have to hustle. We can take our time. We can, help our kids adapt and, thrive in these environments too. And some kids do. Like I know Ola is, needs that quieter time. I know some kids thrive on farms and they love it, but you just got to do you. Just make it work for whatever you need to do. And I mean, we need to leave the farm and go for therapy and all of those things. And then the farm jobs wait and we do it when we get home, right?
Right. Yeah. Just embrace the life that you have and,
And don't let people tell you that you can't do it. Like when we were talking about moving, there was conversations with family and friends that were like, you're crazy. You're going to take her out into the middle of nowhere. We're not in the middle of nowhere. We're close enough to town, but like, you're going to take her away from all these therapies and all these things. And it's like, no, like it's all available still. It's all doable. You just have to make sure that you're willing to like put in the effort to drive to town to go to therapy, right? Yeah. Don't let people tell you can't do it. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. Do whatever you want.
You do you.
You do you. You go to those farms and raise those animals and still have your children. It's all good.
Exactly. Oh, that was so good. Leanna, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. You are just a light, and I have really enjoyed getting to chat with you today. For the listeners who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
I would tell them just go to Instagram. That's where I mostly am, at Lone Sequoia Ranch. And like I said, there's a link tree there, so you can find our Etsy shop there, and hopefully at some point a website. But we're not quite there yet. But Instagram is my favorite place to be.
Perfect. And I will link all of those in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again for joining me on the Rural Woman podcast today. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman podcast. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producer, Sarah Riedner of Happiness by the Acre, and to my editor, Max Hofer. For show notes, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com. You can connect with me on social media using the handle @WildRoseFarmer on all platforms. If you love the show, make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts, plus share it with a friend. We'll see you next time.